the end of the Roman Empire. This is where they built one of the world's great barriers, Hadrian's Wall. Not merely to keep out unwelcome visitors from the north, up there, but to mark the last bastion of the civilized world as the Romans saw it, and the start of the wilderness. Today, Hadrian's Wall is a magnet for people from all over the globe. But it's far from the only reason to explore this narrow neck of England, just 70 miles from coast to coast, which the Romans chose to defend. Because it was here, in the Tyne Valley, that Britain's first cross-country railway made history 150 years ago. And today we can still explore this lovely countryside, wall and all, the easy way, by train. This is the Tyne, which warms the heart of every homecoming Geordie, where the big ships were built. They've gone now, but the bridges are still here, all 6 of them. The first one was built by the Romans to protect a key fort. In fact, we're just about 3 miles from Wall's End at this point. That's as far east as Hadrian's Wall ran. 900 years later, the conquering Normans built a Newcastle. And that's how Newcastle, as the locals call it, was born. Step off the Intercity 125 and you can explore Newcastle by the Geordie equivalent of the London Underground, the Metro. Nowadays, it's an international shopping centre. Trippers from Scandinavia come over to spend their krona, and even Scots will be known to rake into an odd warby or two here. But Newcastle is a vibrant city. It's full of ancient buildings which offer a unique link with our heritage and our past. It's close to the seashore and some of the most marvellously unspoiled beaches in Europe, and it offers a bustling nightlife scene as well. Of course, I'm a wee bit biased. This is where I was born and brought up. But we're going back along the Tyne Valley, toward the place I live now, Lakeland. The newest station on the line is only minutes away, across the Tyne at Gateshead. Your Pacer train stops outside the largest shopping centre in the whole of Europe, and the biggest outside the USA, the Metro Centre. It's a day out in itself. Past the site of Tyneside's traditional Blaydon races, we come to one of the oldest railway stations in Britain, Wylam. It's still in daily use by anglers and walkers, as well as shoppers and commuters. But routes and railways go deep around here. Where the famous old loco Puffing Billy ran through this pit village over 150 years ago, you can now stroll through the Tyne Country Park. The welcome boards you'll find at all Tyne Valley stations uncover the local treasures for you. For example, it was here at High Street House that the father of railways, George Stephenson, was born in 1781. There's the famous rocket he designed, the classic steam engine which puffed its way into the hearts of generations of small boys and their dads. 5 young Stephensons and their parents lived together in this one room. George worked on a farm and down a pit before he built his first locomotive. And his son Robert built locos for Britain's longest railway. Well, it was back in 1835 when it was planned. That was the coast-to-coast Newcastle to Carlisle run, the very one we're still riding today in crisp new pacer trains. Prudhoe Castle, Northumbria. Northumbria was a land of castles, of course. It had to be. Back in the early Middle Ages, England and Scotland were still in the melting pot. The region was tailor-made for brigandry, and the people made full use of it, raiding backwards and forwards over the border. As well as being adept at farming and cattle raising, the old Northumbrian, if he intended to survive, had to be a dab hand at murder, looting, arson, and blackmail as well. And you can find out all about Northumbrian castles at Prudhoe, where English Heritage does a splendid job keeping them open to the public and even stages a medieval combat here in the tourist season. The tranquil Tyne actually flooded the valley back in 1771. Bursting its banks and demolishing bridges. This was the only one to survive. It's over 300 years old and built on the site of a Roman bridge close to 2,000 years old. You can still see the Roman stones at low water. This is Corbridge, once the capital of Northumbria. Still a lovely spot to explore with lots of history from Romans to Vikings to these restored bottle kilns. The Roman town of Costopadum is half a mile outside the village. It was the Roman stone from Costopadum that went to build the abbey here at Hexham. They call it the finest church north of the Alps. You can still get the flavour of a medieval town here. Step out of the abbey and you're right in the bustling marketplace.
Oh, is anybody else selling a black or green grape? £2 for 60. £2 for 10. Want some grapes there? £2 for 60 pence. Want a cheap one?
The Moot Hall is now a gallery, and the information centre is in the old jail. There's a round bus trip from Hexham which takes in some of the best spots on Hadrian's Wall, and that's where we're going. What we call Hadrian's Wall today is really only the low-level remains, the footings almost of the wall that was. No way can you get a real feeling of what it was like to actually stand guard on a turret, except here. This is Vindolanda, a fort even older than Hadrian's Wall itself and situated about 2 miles south of the actual wall line. It's been restored by a trust, and with the help of my friends from the Ermine Street Guard, you can get some idea of what life was like here about 1,800 years ago. A bit chilly around the knees, lad. The poet W.H. Auden captured the flavour very well in his Roman Wall blues. Over the heather the wet wind blows, I've lice in me tunic and a cold in me nose. The rain comes pattering out of the sky, I'm a wall soldier, I don't know why. Remember, these lads were far from their homes around the sunny Mediterranean, and they'd had to build all these forts, as well as the 80 Roman miles of the wall itself. They built the lot in just 5 years, without using slaves. And 80 Roman miles, incidentally, equals 73 modern miles. So that's a lot of stone to cut and carry and construct. They had a castle to mark each individual mile. We know a lot about Roman life here too. At Vindolanda, they're still digging, as you can see. They found letters written with pen and ink. They found leather sandals, even fragments of clothing. We tend to imagine that the Romans were fairly primitive by today's standards. In fact, they were amazingly sophisticated. They had their own version of central heating. They had cat's eyes, little luminous rocks sunk into the ground to show them the way home on winter nights. They had self-service restaurants complete with hot plates. They were a remarkable people. And there's so much to see here. And not surprisingly, school parties keep it fairly busy, so if you possibly can, it's wise to plan your visit out of season. But let's get back to Hadrian's Wall itself. This is Housesteads, the best-known fort on Hadrian's Wall. And if you stand in the gateway, you'll notice an intriguing link between the Romans and modern railways. These ancient cart tracks measure exactly 4 feet 8.5 inches, which is precisely the same width as a modern railway track. Now, obviously, the Romans didn't have railways, but their carts must have been the same size as the horse-drawn coal wagons which George Stephenson converted to steam traction. So not only did the Romans give us the straightest roads in Britain, they also gave us the roots of modern railways. Housesteads was really a fortified town, with granaries, a hospital, shops and inns. Looking at it now, we tend to assume everything was grey stone. But there was a lot of colour around. Stone sculpture was often painted in bright, vivid colours. You can get a good idea from the reconstructed temple to Mithras, the Roman god of the sun, in the Newcastle Museum of Antiquities. There's so much to see up here. It's no wonder that young and old from all over the world come to stare and to stride out. Like us, they follow the wall. So let's get back on the train and head west. The Tyne Valley line not only takes tourists and shoppers, it carries classroom commuters too, like these local youngsters who rely on the train to get them to school and home safely in all weathers. From Haltwhistle, a railway name if ever you heard one, you can take a coach to Alston, which connects with another period of rail history. The South Tynedale Railway is one of Britain's born-again steam lines, which attracts so many supporters. There are parks and picnic places all along the line, but perhaps none to touch this. We're south of Brampton, where George Stephenson's rocket ended its working life on a colliery line. And this is Tolkien Tarn. It's a paradise for bird watchers, anglers, water sports of all kinds, and for those of us who just enjoy looking at splendid scenery. This is not the Tyne, but the River Eden, and the Eden Valley can be as blissful as the first garden. Cross over the 90-foot-high viaduct from Wetherell Station. It's been a local landmark for over 150 years, and it used to cost a halfpenny to cross. The stone lions of Corby Castle, guarding the home of the Howard family for over 350 years. But today, they welcome visitors. We're at the end of our journey in the noble city of Carlisle, capital of the Roman wall system and the Cumbrian capital today. These local youngsters are sampling medieval life in the castle, which captures the very essence of this richly historic area. It withstood siege against parliamentary forces for 9 months during the Civil War. It entertained Bonnie Prince Charlie and his 100 pipers during the Jacobite Rebellion. And it was the scene of one of the very first commando raids, when the Bull Buccleuch crossed the Esk with 80 men to rescue that arch-rascal Kinmont Willie. An attack which caused Queen Elizabeth I to exclaim, "With 10,000 such followers, the King of Scotland might shake the firmest throne in Europe." Mary, Queen of Scots, was imprisoned here. Her tower is now the Museum of the Border Regiment. Their regimental march is still Do You Ken John Peel, another Cumbrian hero. Yesterday and today sit happily side by side in Carlisle, as they do right along the Tyne Valley, with modern shopping centres like the Lanes, to this warning on the courthouse toll gate. Your cart load of potatoes or grain will still cost you a penny to pass. Carlisle Station, end of the Tyne Valley line and gateway to the Scottish border country, the Cumbrian coast and the English Lake District. I hope you've enjoyed exploring in the footsteps of the Roman legions, because for me, the Tyne Valley is a remarkable section of countryside. It's rich in legend and folklore, and the marvelous thing is, you can see it all on Britain's scenic railway.